starting.
I might
Welcome,
not do it.
everyone.
I might not do it just because I don't want problems.
I think we're live now. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the session on advisors' best practices. We'll start in a little bit. As you're joining us, if you would like to go ahead and tell us where you're joining us from, that'd be great. We'll give it one more minute or so, and then we'll get started. Hi, Shamar. Hey, Mary. All right. Why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. It is really a great pleasure to have this session and this time with you. My name's Adan Colon Carmona. I'm professor of biology at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And I am on the board of directors of SACNAS, and I'm also on the subcommittee of chapters for the society. I am also a chapter advisor on my campus, which is a primarily undergraduate chapter, although we do have some graduate students who participate. So welcome everyone to this session. As we get started, know that you can use the Q&A button to ask your questions. We'll go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. I'll ask a few questions to get started, but then we hope that it's a conversation with you. So please go ahead and feel free to ask your questions to all of us. All right, so panelists, I'll call on the first person, and then you can go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know how you got involved in your chapter. Marcela, why don't you start?
All right, thank you, Aran. My name is Marcela Hernandez or Hernandez, depending on the language. I am one of the two advisors for the Ohio State chapter. And we started the chapter in 2013. And that was actually motivated by the fact that I attended my first SACNAS conference that year. And I remember going to a presentation where they showed a map of the United States showing where all the chapters were. And I realized there were 0 in Ohio. And I was really thinking this is outrageous. And I am probably the biggest university in Ohio, and we don't have a chapter. So I went to my colleague, Yolanda Cepeda from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and I said, we need to start a chapter. And we put a call out to our students, and they came, and we started the chapter. And we decided to make it both undergraduate and graduate. Our experience is that we struggled to get undergraduate students, but graduate students find us because of all the wonderful chapters that they come from. So when they are at an institution where they've been part of a chapter, they come to Ohio State, and one of the first things they do is to look up if we have a chapter. And when they find that we do, they come and say, we want to be part of this chapter. So we don't have that hard of a time recruiting graduate students, but it's harder to get undergraduates, although we now have more of them. And so that's how we started. And the one thing I will say is that one of, I think, our chapter strengths is that the two advisors are bringing to the table very different things. Because I am a scientist, I can talk a lot about the experience of being a student in the STEM world, and I can help them navigate that. But my colleague Yolanda, she is um, sociologist, so she has a different strengths that I do. And in addition to that, she is, because of her administrative experience, she's able to provide a lot of exposure to our chapter, because she knows like all the things that are going on in the university where she thinks we need to be a part of. I'm sorry that was a little bit longer than probably you wanted, but I will call on Sonia.
Yeah, thanks, Marcella. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, wow, everything you said. My name is Sonia Martinez, and I am a co-chapter advisor at Idaho State University. We started this chapter about 3 years ago, and I just got a phone call from a new faculty member who said, do you have a SACNAS chapter? Because I'm a SACNAS alum. I mean, she was undergrad and grad. She's a Native American and chose this university because we're right next and in the lands of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. So I do want to make that acknowledgement. And so I said, well, no, but I do know of SACNAS because I've attended some of their conferences for, other reasons and in another other career, not university. And so, we just, like you said, we put a call out. Interestingly enough, we have more of an undergrad representation than a grad, because we have more of a diverse population in undergrad than we do in graduate school. I do want to just quickly say, Marcella, you're absolutely right. I actually bring the administrative part of it, and Dr. Martin brings she's the faculty, brings the academic side of it. And so it works really well. It's worked well for us. And Nancy.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Street. I'm the Associate Dean of the Graduate School at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. And I so appreciate the invitation to be part of this. At UT Southwestern, we are a graduate-only institution. And much as Marcella mentioned, the way that our program got started is two students who had been part of SACNAS as undergraduates said, hey, can we form a SACNAS chapter? And since I am over diversity and inclusion, I said, absolutely. And then one of my main strategies has been to be rather hands-off with the ideas and the structure of the organization. And here's a picture of our chapter. And I basically work as hard as I can to get out of the way of these kids and all the fantastic ideas that they have. And we have been very fortunate, even during this time of COVID, to be able to maintain a high level of activity. And it's been a great addition to our campus. And we so appreciate the national support from SACNAS for our efforts. All right. And our last speaker, I'm not going to butcher your name. I'm going to wait until you say it so I can understand.
You could try.
Okay, Oludor Otimi.
Oludrotimi. All right, so I'm Oludrotimi Adetunji. I'm Associate Dean at Brown, and we started the chapter 9 years ago. So the reason we started the chapter is basically due to the fact that a student reached out to me specifically, Teresa Ramanzi. She's now, she was a graduate student then, she's gotten a PhD. And at that time, I think she found out about me because I've been a member of SACNAS since almost 12 years. So she reached out, and this is something that I absolutely was completely in support of. And the rest is history. So we worked together Teresa. Then finally, I also reached out to a colleague of mine, Mark Johnson. So we started to support the student, and it's been 9 years now. Just thinking back at wow, a lot of transition that has happened, and the chapter is still going really strong. So that's how I got started with the chapter.
Great, thank you. I'll ask the first question, but I want to remind the participants that you can ask also a question in the Q&A box. So to all the panelists, how do you support your chapter? And do you take a more hands-on approach, or do you let the students take more initiative for stepping in terms of the support? How do you advise your chapter? Is it more
I
hands-on?
wanted to say that I think for us, it's been an evolution. So when we first started, we were very hands-on because we had to get them started and we had to help them establish things like the website, the various collaboration sites where all the documentation is, etc. So I think in the first 3 years, we were extremely involved. But then, as all of these tools were established, the new executive boards would not have had such a hard time continuing the work. And so we started kind of loosening up our interventions. And at this time, we actually let them run everything themselves. And we do meet with them once a month. We meet with the president and the vice president once a month to just make sure that if they have any needs that we need to meet, that's where we find out. And we also try to attend. They usually have 2 meetings a month, so we try to attend one of those meetings per month. But just like to be there and be available, not we really are much more hands off right now.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I'm just going to add to what Marcella just said. So obviously, um, in the early stage of the SACNAS chapter at Brown, we had to help the students to get themselves completely set up. But now student pretty much we give them agency to run the chapter. We listen to their ideas and then we find ways to support those ideas. So all of the success that we've been able to achieve at Brown, I would say it's mostly the student. We're just there guiding them and helping them navigate the system. But it's a lot of their ideas that have allowed us to succeed.
I would agree with that statement for sure, that the success of our chapter is solely on the shoulders of the students who have led us. And in the beginning, like Marcella, I was a bit more involved as we developed a structure within our university where we could be a recognized organization. And now I think I play 2 main roles. One is to make sure that they have the financial support that they need to carry out the events that they want to. And our chapter focuses both on in-reach, so supporting the younger SACNAS chapter members, and outreach into the community. And then the second way that I play a big role is every year when we transition officers. So we have a planning meeting, we roughly outline the entire year. All of the officers update the description of their particular job, and that's passed on to the next person. And then I do meet with them and go to their meetings on occasion. I think, again, since they're graduate students, I try and give them even more responsibility and less on me. Not that I'm not interested, but it's a great training ground for them as they build this organization and keep it going forward.
Yeah, I just want to say that with our group, they have very well defined job descriptions, and I've noticed that they have really strong. I mean, I'm so proud of them. They have very strong leadership skills, and it really helps. We're a newer chapter. We're still going through growing pains. But one of the things I found is that the leadership is really important. And one of the ways that I support them is really by, I want to say, honoring their space and their leadership growth. And so they've developed their own structure of communication, and I follow it. Another way that I support it obviously is really by advocating at the university level with different departments. And so I have those connections with different, getting the word out to different departments for support. We are part of the university, we're a university organization. And last year, the chapter won organization of the year and leadership of the year. So I'm really proud of them for that. But I'm a really hands off, because and I'm here for them, and I believe in that leadership development. So I provide a lot of support, and sometimes I have to step in and kind of rein them in, because they want to go off on a direction that's not part of the 3 pillars. I'm keeping a watchful eye and just, hoping that as they develop those leadership skills, that they know that I'm here to support them.
If I could stay on that theme of providing administrative support, or advocating for your chapter at the administrative level that Sonia just mentioned, can the panelists share maybe one tip that that you do, or some general tip that you can give on how you support your chapter at the administrative level? Nancy, you mentioned finances, but
Right.
could you
Finance
go
is
ahead.
big. And then we also give them a platform to advertise the events that they have. So while SACNAS our members are almost primarily Hispanic and American Indian, whenever they have an event, they open it up to all of our graduate students, especially when it's an outreach event. So we give them a platform to advertise that across the school. And then the other thing is just being available to them. Like all of us, I'm sure I'm a workaholic. And so if they've got a SACNAS crisis right before an event, they just know, email me, text me, and I'll be there. So I think that that feeling supported is very important to them.
Yeah, Avan, can I jump back in and say
Sure.
that I work out of the Office for Research, and I actually have an annual fund that I contribute toward supporting the chapter. So, for example, when they got started, if they wanted T-shirts, then I put that in my budget. We also work really closely with the McNair program, and between our office and their office, we're able to fund students that want to go and present their research. And so it really helps to be able to do that.
Great.
I guess
Go ahead.
one other thing I would add is that while we're developing the mission statement for the SACNAS chapter at Brown, we make sure that there are alignments in some of our goals with institutional goals. So it allowed us to make a very strong justification for what we're trying to do, and that allowed us to get a lot of support. So depending on your institution, if they are part of the mission of your SACNAS chapter that aligns with the institutional goals, it will allow you to be able to get buy-in, because you need buy-in from the administration, and that might be one way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that different institutions operate differently. So I am at a state university, and we have a lot of red tape when you want to, like, for example, bring a speaker and pay for their travel and all of that. And that's extremely overwhelming for the students. So one way we support them is that we take care of all that paperwork. And then what we do is we pay for things up front, and then they pay us. And that's kind of a mechanism that the university has established. They also have a very, very good a student organization serving unit within student affairs, and they provide a lot of support for student organizations. And since this one is an official student organization, they also get a lot of help, and they also give them operational funds, and they also give them the opportunity to apply for more funds, which they do often with our help. We help them with a lot of the paperwork.
Great. I think I'm going to take one of the questions from the participants. Paola asks, SACNA's chapter is a new chapter. I'm assuming that's on her institution, but I'm already starting to think about continuity. Any tips to ensure that continuity as students graduate?
Yeah, so at Brown we have transition meetings between the executive board that are outgoing and the one that are coming in. We make sure that that connection is made, and in those meetings they share their challenges, how they overcame them. So they share notes. So we make sure that the elections are done at the right time so that the transition is well managed. And now we've done this now. This is the ninth year we're doing this. So I think that we've been really successful in making that as part of our chapter. The other thing is that we've developed sort of like guiding principle of what when we need to do what and who needs to do what. So having a document like that, such that we can pass on notes from the previous leadership group to the next leadership group.
The only thing I would add to that is we've had a few years where officers remained the same, maybe 2 years, and then we had to switch, and it seemed like it might be a rough transition on occasion. And what I would do then is have them identify someone 6 months in advance of the change and have them sort of be that officer in training.
Yeah, I want to follow up with Nancy. We do that as well. Our very first president was really charismatic and just very out there. In fact, the students made a cup that says his first name's Adolfo Mas Chismoso. It was a pun because he was all over campus. But what he did is establish a transition where the vice president is then taught those leadership skills so that when the president graduates, the vice president is able to step in. And so what the officers do is identify that someone that could be a really good leader and then start training them, kind of transitioning them so that they become the president. And then as the president or the vice president, then the president leaves and the vice president is then elected as president.
Yeah, that's what we do too. The vice president becomes the president, and then they recruit someone to become their vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I would think it was really a game changer is that they wrote protocols for everything. So there's like 2 major events they do a year. So they have a protocol for all of that so that the new people don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything is established already.
I'm going to take a question from Karina, who is at a community college and asks, I know that I think all of you are at 4-year institutions, but what advice do you have for community colleges where students tend to spend less time than 4 years, or in graduate school? So do any of you have experience with community colleges, and what advice could you give, Karina?
I mean, I guess what I would say is that you can think about the transition instead of a 1 year, you could think about it as a 6 months transition. Such that since if it's a 2-year program where student will have to graduate, you might decide to begin a transition much earlier than we would normally do. And that way have this series of meetings ahead of time such that the current leadership group might be able to engage with the new ones that are coming in. The other point I will make is what Nancy suggested about having student in training. So, I mean, you could have a much younger student or a newer student creating some form of role for them such that they are part of the leadership. They might not be the president or vice president, but they have some form of leadership role such that overall, by the time they a year from then they can transition into a more senior role. That would be my advice.
Good. I'll go ahead and maybe paraphrase this next question from Beverly, I think. Do you, or is SACNAS, I would say, is the chapter tracking the achievements of its students and the resources that it has access to?
We do track, for example, participation in the national conference, and we are very proud that every year we've had a student win an award for presentation. And so we actually brag about this to the entire university. We put an announcement in a newsletter that goes to the entire university, and that is, we track that, but we don't track some other things that I think it would be a good idea to track. But I know anecdotally, for example, that among our graduate students, we've had about 3 NSF GRFP recipients. We also do track where they're going next. So we know where our graduate students are being postdocs at. We know where our undergrads went to grad school, if they did. And we also created a LinkedIn group for all of our alumni. So once they move out from Ohio State, we put them on this LinkedIn group, and that's how we try to keep communicating with them.
Marcela, if I could follow up, is the chapter doing that, or are the advisors doing that?
Both. Like we kind of remind them, and they also have kept track of all of their executive board history, like who was the president in this year, who was the vice president, and all that. So they do it, but oftentimes we remind them, don't forget to collect this information. It is not 100% complete, but we do the best we can.
Does anybody else want to tackle that?
We do track the events, both internal and external, that our chapter carries out each year. And initially, we did this to help the next year's planning, but it's such a positive wrap up for the end of a particular school year when they can look back and see all of the things they accomplished in the past year. It's a real feel good moment for those students, and sort of inspires the next year to, hit that same bar or more.
I'll take a question from Anahi, who asks, how many people from the board are part of your chapter? Is there a sweet spot in the number? Meaning president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, ... How many? What do your chapters have? Do you have an opinion on that?
We have 5, and that seems to work well.
What are the positions?
Those that are listed there, and in addition, who puts together newsletters and helps with the website.
Yeah, we have a communications one too, or the chapter does, and the communications works really well because they're the ones that I communicate with the most. Like, I haven't seen the activity on the university website. Did you get it on there? I try not to nag, but I just kind of nicely nudge and remind. And so makes it nice because then I don't have to bother the VP or the president. So the communications one I think is a really important role.
Those roles plus communication, which I think is great. And they're very active on our communication people on Twitter and Instagram as well, advertising the chapter. And then we have two people who oversee outreach, and we have two people who oversee what they call like social events, but that's sort of our in-reach as well. So we have like a group of 9, and that seems to work well for us.
Yeah, we have about 9 or 10 also. We have folks dedicated to outreach. We have a webmaster. We professional development chair or someone in charge of professional development workshops, treasury vice president. We have postdoc liaison role as well, an alumni relation. Yeah.
I'll ask a question. What is a challenge that your chapter faced in this last year, and how did you help them overcome it?
Well, I think with COVID, of course, that presented a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. And so one of the things that that I think was a positive outcome of all this is that as we were struggling to get people to Zoom in because, they were Zooming for everything. So it was really hard to get them to do it for something that wasn't related to class or work. We have we heard from, well, we have an alumna who was our first president, and then she went to University of Cincinnati as a graduate student, and she started a chapter there. And so we started communicating with them, and then we found out that of 2 other chapters in Ohio. So we got all together and we decided to do programming together, because now with Zoom we could have students in all 4 institutions joining, and we were publicizing beyond just the populations of the chapters, but like other groups on in every campus that would want to participate. And we also took turns on like who would lead the event, so that each institution would have a turn and it wouldn't be so much work for one chapter. And so we did this, and it was really successful. Each chapter came up with something they wanted to do, and then they shared the link, and we had a lot of people from all over the state joining in.
Cool.
Yeah. So one challenge that we've had and that we've tried to resolve is that so our chapter comprises of undergrad as well as graduate student, and having there are a lot of advantages of having a chapter like that. One, the undergrad can benefit from mentoring from the graduate student, but sometimes it's challenging for us to get a lot of undergrad to our event and for them to be engaged. So one of the things that we just launched this past year is we created a new role, which is specifically an undergraduate president. So we have the graduate president and we have the undergraduate president. So now having that role gives the undergrad more, it gives them more opportunity to be connected to the group. And we think this is really going to help us going forward. And we're really excited about that.
We also had great things happen out of the very difficult situation of COVID. And like Marcelo mentioned, our kids started dropping off attendance with the SACNAS, more social meetings, just because they were Zoomed out. And so our students are so clever. They decided to launch a series called Cooking with SACNAS. and they would send out in advance a list of the ingredients, and then they would cook things, something from Puerto Rico, something from Latin America, something from Mexico. And oh my gosh, the attendance has gone so high. And again, they open it to everyone. And so it's been a very positive thing. So that was great. The other thing that our students did during COVID is they noticed that our janitorial staff was primarily Hispanic, and they're contracted workers. And so they became very involved in making sure that those workers had the COVID vaccine. And there was some language barriers, and they helped navigate those and help them sign up for COVID shots. So again, something that started out very stressful, in the end, when they put their minds to it and worked together, it worked out very well.
So we had just coming out of COVID, but we're still kind of somewhat in COVID. We're still pretty hybrid. Our president started a podcast, and they have, I wish I could show you their logo. They're so creative. They have a logo called Desde Abajo, Roots to STEM. And it's beautiful. And so one of the things they want to do is, because most of mine, and I'd say pretty much all, are first generation science. And so they really want to do outreach because they felt they lacked that representation, or even knowing what they wanted to do, or what careers were available. So they've started a podcast. And that's how they're right now, they've just started it, but they're getting the information out to to students in high school, to hear it, and to hear their different interviews, and they're inviting faculty on campus, and just interviewing scientists and people in various fields. And so that's one of their creative ways of doing their outreach.
Great, thank you all. I'm going to take Jorge Ramos's comment and make it into a question. And what he's saying is it would be awesome to share protocols about transitions. But I'm wondering whether any of your chapters or yourselves are sharing best practices from your chapters with other local chapters near your area or in your region.
Well, I can take that question. So we are planning. We've been lucky enough to be the host. We'll be hosting a regional meeting next year. So, and part of that involves talking to the chapters around the Northeast. So hopefully, as we begin those conversations, we'll be able to share some of our experiences, learn from them, as we all collectively try to host this event next year.
So we had that interaction that I mentioned during COVID, and I think that we're gonna interact with these other chapters again this year. I saw some emails that they're going to get together and talk about what they want to do this year. But they haven't asked us, the other chapters, really for advice. We are the oldest chapter in the region. But I do think that maybe that's a good idea to establish something like that, maybe like a listserv or something that they can always put a question, because sometimes you don't know what you want to ask until you hit something, and like, I wonder how other chapters do this. And I think there is a SACNAS centralized way to ask other chapters questions. Am I wrong about that?
That question, I do not know an answer to that. Maybe we can ask Eric to put his answer in the chat for folks.
I think the answer to that is, I know there is an advisors listserv, that you could post the question, uh, but I don't know. Beyond that, I don't think I know the answer to that question. But I know I get some email that a bunch of advice are on the email. So
I would like to comment on the question about sharing resources between chapters. I myself am involved in the New England regional meetings, and I think that has been one of the best ways that advisors of the different chapters in the regions have been able to communicate with one another on a regular basis and share those common practices that exist within the chapters. And if you have an opportunity to be able to connect with those chapters in your region, I think that is one of the most productive ways of making that happen, is having a regional meeting. I'll ask a question from Lorena, and she's curious about whether students of any major can join your chapter, or is it specific to a particular school or program?
I'm going to answer that for us because we're a small university, and we're I want to say about 14% Hispanic and about 1% Native, because that population is a small population. We do open it up to students in any major. However, because we are so science-based, I tend to see that they're attracted to the chapter and to the outreach and also the culture aspect of it. But I have noticed, because we're on this little membership group chat, I have noticed that we lose people that are not in the STEM fields.
Yeah, we don't have an explicit rule against non-STEM majors joining, but when we advertise at the recruitment fair that the university holds every year, when we want to recruit freshmen and first-year grad students, we do advertise as a society for people who are interested in science. So I think that and because we have so many student organizations, even for the same ethnicities that SACNAS is serving, that I think a lot of the other students that are not in STEM find groups that are probably closer to their interests. And so we don't have any student that is not in a STEM major.
So we don't have any rule about which major should be part of this. It's pretty much open. Brown also have this whole idea of the open curriculum. So if any student can pretty much join if they want to, they can be part of the group. Especially if they need some form of mentoring, also that might be good for them. So it's pretty open. But I guess if I it looks like just anecdotal that most of the members have some science intended, planning to pursue a science intended major.
Yes, we also open it up to everyone, although everyone on our campus is science, either basic research or medical or School of Health Professions, but all would be welcome to join.
I'll ask a question. One of the things in the strategic plan for SACNAS is to grow chapters at the professional level. And so what advice would you give to professionals who are considering starting a chapter, but haven't really started or not sure how to do that? So we're talking about professionals, not necessarily a student, a graduate student or an undergraduate.
professionals working in the academy or in industry, or like,
or whatever. Let's say they're not in. Let's take industry. Do you have any advice for someone who's in industry and wants to start a chapter?
well, I would say just like in any, I would give similar advice. Find the right set of people within that industry or your company that share similar goals, and then based on that, find the stakeholders that will be supportive of the mission that you're trying to aspire. I think by doing that, you'll be able to uh, have an opportunity to establish a good chapter.
I think one thing I would do if I were in a company is to reach out to human resources. They have these things called affinity groups. So, for example, a women's group or a, you know, Hispanic engineers group or whatever it is in the company does. Most companies do have these affinity groups that are funded by HR and usually led by employees. So the first thing I would do is I would ask, I want to start an affinity group that would be a SACNAS professional chapter, and I was explaining what it would be, and they might have a lot of help. They may be able to help with a lot of the recruitment part because they've already helped other affinity groups, and that can get you started.
Okay, there's a question here about funding. Nancy, you brought this up earlier, but Anahi says that at our institution, we don't have funds that are regular allocated to the chapter. Is there any recommendation you may have on how to reach out to the administration so that they get funding on a regular basis? It really fluctuates up and down from year to year. So are there some general advice that you can give a chapter so that their funding stays more constant?
So I used to have to carve my funding out of my budget, which was fine. But then our Student Office for Diversity and Inclusion broadened its reach. We're on a medical school campus, so sort of the biggest player in there is the medical students, but we kept vying for recognition of the fact that the graduate students and the students in the School of Health profession also needed support. And so that office now oversees finances for all of our students. And so we just kept pushing and pushing until they figured out a metric whereby, based on the number of students that we have, they could count on financial support for their efforts. But it can be challenging to make that happen. And the way we finally made it happen was just asking this person, asking this person, asking this person, finally finding the right person. But I think making it like a line item or something guaranteed is so critically important.
Yeah, I would say making it a line item, absolutely, it would be important. So at Brown, initially when we started, the college, which is the undergraduate school at Brown, was where we were able to get a lot of support, like trying to get regular yearly funds. And now recently, this past year, we've been able to get support from the graduate school. So the graduate school dean has been able to support us to have also another line item. So I think going forward, we will continue to have at least something more regular, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think that reaching out to your Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which I think most institutions have, and making a case of why this is important. And I would also align it with the recruitment goals for the university. So I know all of our new universities want to become more and more diverse. And we always pitch this as a way that they can achieve that, because it gives them something to show prospective students that they're doing, and they can also use our accomplishments as a chapter to attract new students. So I think it's a matter of pitching it as how the university actually would benefit from constantly funding your chapter. And I think that at the smaller institutions, I think even you will have an office of diversity and inclusion, and also like the whatever college houses all your science majors. That is another unit that I would advocate too. And I say, if you want to attract more science majors, this is from diverse backgrounds. This is a way we can work together to do that. And I think if you can at least cobble together 2 or 3 units that are committed to giving certain amount of money, that will give you some baseline to operate with.
I want to follow up with Marcella. We are, what she said, the science. Our office supports the office of the College of Science and Engineering, and it's been the way that we've been able to do it is, I think someone mentioned that we aligned our what we do with the institutional goals, and some of those goals of increasing diversity in our various departments in research, and in particular in science research, to meet the NSF, a lot of our NSF goals and institutional goals as a research university. It's a pretty strong case to make, and so I haven't had any issues with getting funding for the chapter.
We don't have a lot more time left, but I do want to give the panelists an opportunity to sort of say some final words around some advice that you want to give to people who are either starting a new chapter or are chapters that have been around but need a little bit of a nudge or encouragement. I have my puppy here who's saying hello. um, so anybody want to start to give some final words?
One thing I will say is that part of the success of our chapter, I think, is because we as advisors, we're not just there to advise, we're there to support, and we tell them this is a lifelong relationship. So when you leave, you're not getting rid of us. We're still gonna, we have this LinkedIn group, and sometimes we bring them over to talk to the students, to tell them what they did with their degree, for example. But I also um, check on them and ask them, how are you doing? How is, because for example, I had a student who went to MIT as a postdoc, and I ran into him at the national conference, and I could tell something was wrong. And I said, okay, what's up? And I happened to have a colleague at MIT who was at the conference. So I went and I introduced the two of them, and I said, you need to talk. And I told the person from MIT, I said, this is one of our brightest students. Please, 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 you gotta take care of him. And that's kind of the thing that we do, is to make sure that we help them with those transitions, because we know those transitions are tough, but we want them to think of us as mentors more than just advisors.
Such great comments,
Yeah.
Marcella. And I would just say that I always also try to remember that these are still leaders in training, and offer them some advice, some gentle nudges, some guidance, while still giving them room to fail, which isn't horrible, not a disastrous failure. But I mean, I've been in graduate education for 23 years, and there are students who, are still in touch with me, and it's a relationship. So the winner in my mind is me, for sure, having this opportunity, and then just seeing the impact these kids are having.
Yeah, I mean, all of what they've said, um, having this lifelong relationship, being able to uh, be there to connect them, even when they graduate, to other colleagues, other collaborators, just knowing that this is this is we will be there for you no matter what, and also letting them know that you have to you have to pay this forward, wherever you go and you end up having a great position, make sure you do the same thing for other younger students that are coming up. So that's what I will say to.
Sonia, do you want to say any parting words to the participants?
Well, we're a fairly new, like I said, we're a fairly new chapter. We're very proud that we were able to establish a chapter in the first chapter in Idaho, and now I see that the University of Idaho has started a chapter. So I'd like to say that we're a little bit of an influence. I want to say that lifelong relationship is definitely important. And for future, for current advisors and future advisors. I also have stayed late in the hours of graduate students that have gone on and need to connect with me after they've gone on to graduate school, to other universities. And so it is a lifelong type relationship. And then also what I love is when we had um, our Zoom presentations, is that sometimes I'll notice some of the students that have gone on to graduate school and other larger prestigious universities, that they actually log in, and and that they're still looking forward to some of what we have to offer. And so that's I think a really cool thing about SACNAS.
Thank you so much for your time and your words of wisdom. We really appreciate it. To all the panelists, thank you. And to the participants out there, thank you for your comments in the chat and your questions. Stay connected with other advisors across the region and nationally. And thank you very much for joining us today. Take care,
Thank you
everyone.
for having us.
Thank you.
Adan, how do I connect with you? Do you have an email?
Yes, I could put it in the chat.
Okay.
And one thing I wanted to suggest I don't know how we could make this happen, but I would love it if when faculty members who are participating in this conference, who are, you know, Latinos, Native Americans, Black, any group, that if they come to our campuses as invited speakers to give a seminar, for example, if they could also request um, that they get to meet with the SACNAS chapter, that would be so awesome, because our universities have so few faculty that look like our students, that if we could have additional interactions that way, so that they could give us I don't know, half an hour in the whole day that they spend at the university, that would be, I think, greatly appreciated.
That's a great idea, Marcela. That's something that I've been not able to do on my campus, is that because I am faculty in the biology department, I will invite those researchers of color from across the country on the biology's dime, because they have some funds to bringing in speakers. And when they come, I have those individuals meet with the SACNAS chapter. So you're right. It's like finding those faculty members in a particular department so that they can invite those researchers of color from anywhere to their
Hmm.
campus and then speak to the SACNAS as part of their visit, because usually they're visiting for a whole day.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Take
Yes,
care.
very
all.
nice to meet everyone.
It's nice
Bye-bye.
meeting you all. And
Bye bye.
I will send everyone an email in the next 5 minutes so that you have my contact.
Great. And
Great.
then
All right. Take
we'll
care.
talk about the regional meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye bye.